Long before the black ships of the heretic fleet appeared on the horizon of Eire, the first stages of the plan were put in motion. Zakur, the heretic sea lord who commanded the invasion fleet, had long planned the annexation of the Emerald Isle. He was the deadliest threat the Irish had ever faced in their strife-laden history. In the years preceding the invasion, the Path of the Beast started to stir in Eire, due to a pact Zakur made with the Cult of the Moon. The young Irish men and women began to disappear whenever they strayed too far into the woods when the moon was full, only to return home later screaming, their naked bodies carved with the beast runes, some giving birth to monstrosities, others escaping to join the hidden covens in the wild. Many others willingly answered the call of the Hymn of the Beast and went to the wilds of the Emerald Island, turning their backs upon humanity to escape the terrible burden of the Great War. Remote villages were raided by the devolved supplicants of the beast, and crops were burned. Eire found itself isolated from the rest of the faithful nations, as more and more of their merchant vessels were intercepted and plundered. All this sapped the strength of the island nation, and the guard of the shores grew lax as the Irish struggled to contain the supplicants of the beast. A follower of the great Duke Focalor, Zakur was supremely suited to his role as conqueror, for his lord commanded the winds and the waves. Once he felt the Irish were sufficiently weakened, the heretical sea lord gathered his ships and concentrated them into one mighty fleet, making landfall near Ballia. He achieved almost total surprise, with his expeditionary force bringing the mighty heretic artillery on land unhindered. As the Irish gathered their forces to defend their shores, Zakur unleashed the next stratagem of his master plan. With an enormous blood sacrifice of captives, enough goetic power was unleashed so that the long-dormant Hellgate of the Lake of Pulanifrin opened, bringing the armies of the court to support their heretic invasion forces. Caught between two forces and harried by the horrors of the Path of the Beast, raiding their supply columns, the army of Eire was routed, and the High King Murdoch fell in battle. Zakur took the crown of Ireland from his severed head and claimed the island by the right of conquest. With the army of Eire gone, the coastal cities fell to the invaders. Ballia, Loch Orman, Duncannon, Clonmala, Limerick, and Gallup were taken, as well as many other towns and cities. The cathedrals, churches, monasteries, abbeys, and shrines of the saints were razed to the ground or converted into temples of blood. Sacrificial altars were erected where holy shrines once stood, and the Black Knives took the lives of those who dared to rise against the new masters of Eire. Heretic priests now taught hell's coercion in the halls where once the joyous hymns of the Holy Word echoed. With their cities either burned to the ground or in enemy hands, the newly crowned King Niall moved the capital to the inland town of Kilkennig, where the High Kings of old once held court. The inland city proved easier to defend, as the heretic fleet could not bring its guns to bear, but this only led to more and more of the countryside falling to the invaders. The following decades saw almost all of the country taken by the heretic forces, and a huge number of refugees attempted to escape over the sea to France, Alba, and England. Many were caught by the heretic navy, with yet more sacrifices being chained to red-hot bronze pillars or sold into slavery of the court of the seven-headed serpent. Yet others gave up on all their hopes and dreams, turning their backs upon humanity and walking into the wild places to walk the path of the beast, only to return as devolved beasts to prey on those they once called their countrymen. As the war roiled across the Emerald Isle like a storm of death, it was as if a huge snake inexorably swallowed its prey whole, while most of the world simply watched. With their fleet lost to them in the Battle of the Bloody Cliffs, England was unable to intervene in the war, despite the obvious danger of Eire falling to the infernal powers and giving the heretics an ideal base for launching a full-scale conquest of the island of Britain itself. Only the Crown of France still sent reinforcements to support the Irish, the rest of the faithful coalition offering little more than prayers. However, the Duke of New Antioch sent his own bodyguard to aid the Irish, with a message saying that Eire needed them more than even the home of all our hopes. As a young queen, Bridget rose to the throne in 1890, after her father was killed in the front lines by the artillery witch Coven bombardment. By this time, it seemed all hope was lost. In most maps drawn in Europa, Eire was shown as part of the heretic domains, forever lost to the shadow of hell. Ignoring her advisors, Bridget married Donal, a great general and strategist despite his low-born origin. Together, they made a desperate plan to save the kingdom. As one of her first acts, the Queen lifted the ancient ban on Fianna, the hunter-warriors of the wild, despite the irritation of her confessor due to the many pagan ways of the Fianna. With the additional troops secured, the royal court called the clans to send what remained of their strength to take on the heretic main forces. The Queen then wrote a letter to the Pope, asking for the Bishop of Rome to spare but a single warrior to aid the Irish as a symbolic token of his support. When the Supreme Pontiff granted the wish, Bridget then audaciously requested the services of the paladin Ansheish. To the astonishment of the princes of the church, the promise was honoured, and the holy warrior was dispatched to aid the beleaguered Irish. Undertaking his sacred quest in utmost secrecy, the paladin stormed the Hellgate alone, taking only his weapons and the banner of Storogram to aid him in the surprise raid. After receiving information that Zakur the Conqueror was aboard his flagship, Hymn of Obscenity, a raid by the flying columns of Fianna was sent to cut off the head of the serpent. How the Fianna were able to learn the heretic passwords and how they managed to fool the beast guard of Zakur is unknown. What is known, however, is that against all odds, the Fianna succeeded. The mighty behemoth warships were sunk when its ammunition cache was blown up by a Fianna berserker who carried a barrel of explosives through a hail of bullets. The great heretic conqueror was killed in the explosion that took out several ships. Though a huge blow to Hell's forces, this alone would not have changed the course of the war. But from the south came news that the paladin Ansheish had succeeded in his mission. The irreplaceable armour of Ansheish had been torn and his eye lost in battle, but the Hellmouth collapsed behind him as he emerged from the inferno, bloodied but victorious. Without their leader, and cut off from their allies of the court of the seven-headed serpent, the heretic forces were thrown into turmoil. This was the moment the Irish had been waiting for. The Queen's consort Donal led the Irish forces in a campaign that swept the invaders into the sea in a series of brilliant battles. Their losses were horrendous. More than 3/4 of the Irish forces perished before the heretics were defeated, and only thanks to the Fianna keeping the path of the beast at bay, they managed to secure enough supplies to keep the army on the field. Not one of the Duke's bodyguards survived the battle, and to this day the Irish send their expert skirmishers to aid New Antioch in their memory. All in all, the invasion cost the lives of half of the population of Eire due to fighting, famine, and people fleeing the island. It acts as a stark warning to the faithful on how close they all are to utter ruin. Alrighty, so we have some lore about Eire, Ireland, which is sick, obviously, from my point of view. This was really cool. I was reading it this morning after Tuomas sent it to me, and as I got to the bit about the paladin, I was like, yes, that is so, like, that's very Irish, basically. A lot of Irish myth, a lot of Irish folklore is really about outsmarting people or taking advantage of people, frankly. And it's very cool to see that kind of a win represented, because that is exactly the kind of thing that would make up a lot of like Irish stories and Irish lore. Like this is actually worth talking about because the Fianna is mentioned or not. The Fianna is essentially a group of Irish warriors, Irish scouts, Irish skirmishers, however it is you wish to consider them. Historically, they were kind of made up of the young men who couldn't get land, essentially. Young Irish dudes who had nothing to do, nowhere to settle down and no reason to settle down. They used to just scrap. Basically, they, like anything else, any other culture, they formed a large part of the fighting forces that were available at the time. So a huge part of their history is a guy by the name of Fionn McCool, and he is very famous for outsmarting people. One of the people that he outsmarted was a Scottish giant, of all people. They were shit-talking each other, basically. Benadonner, I think, was the giant's name, and they were shit-talking each other. They were going to scrap. Your man was obviously a giant. Fionn McCool was like legendarily strong, but he was no giant. And he gets word that the giant is building the Giant's Causeway, which mythologically it was a bridge between Scotland and Ireland, but it was actually just, hot stone that was cooled in the sea into cool shapes. The giant is building his way over to Ireland, and Fionn McCool is like, oh shit, I don't know what to do. So Fionn McCool's wife tells him, hop in the crib. She's making bread. She dresses him up like a baby. She puts him in a crib, a giant crib, and the giant rolls up and is like, where is Fionn McCool? And she's like, he's out doing Fionn McCool stuff. I'm here. I'm his wife. I'm looking after his kid. And your man looks at like Fionn McCool done up like a baby in this giant crib, and he's like, what the fuck? If that's the kid, how big is the guy? And the wife is like, you must be hungry. Would you like some food? I'm making, bread for the baby. And the giant is like, yeah, you're very hospitable for a woman I'm about to widow. Like, thanks so much. I'll have some bread. She had made up some bread with stones and things like that in him, so it was real hard and impossible to eat. And she gives him that, and he tries to eat it and he can't. And Fionn McCool is there chewing away on normal bread, no problem. And he's like, the baby's massive, can chew this goddamn Satan bread, no problem. I'm out of here. I don't want to have to deal with the dad. And off he goes. But like a lot of Irish myth and legend is made up of that kind of thing. So the idea of Bridget essentially outsmarting the people who would not seem to help Ireland when Ireland really needed help is really cool. That's bang on point. I'm really impressed that Tuomas would have picked up on that type of lore being so predominant and presented here. There's also other cool stuff like we talked about the long dormant Hellgate on the Lake Polynifrin. That's the Devil's Punch Bowl. That's a really cool reference as well. It is associated with Satan, with the devil. There's various stories and stuff as to how it got there. Some people are like an old high king tricked the devil or annoyed the devil or punched the devil or got one over on the devil, basically. And the devil took a bite out of the nearby mountain and threw it at him. And the hole that was left is the lake. So to make that the long dormant Hellgate, I think is really quite cool. So yeah, lots of really fun stuff in this lore. A huge amount of fun stuff. I did have some questions for Tuomas because I knew that ye all would. So I was just asking him. I wanted to just make sure, basically, the path of the beast did not begin in Ireland. I was wondering about that when it said like started to stir. He really just like what it means is when it kind of arrived in Ireland first, as it's like a social contagion is the easiest way to think about it. And that was the beginning of it really like kind of growing to prominence within Ireland. It's not like it kicked off here or was started here or anything like that. It's a kind of a worldwide social contagion. So the Cult of the Moon are just one of many groups of people basically that follow the path of the beast and worship the beast. That's their thing. They're down with it. I wonder if we will see the Cult of the Moon potentially as a sub-faction when the path of the beast eventually drops. I have no idea. And I asked specifically about folklore, because that's very similar to an Irish word, folklore, which means like words or lexicon or dictionary, basically. And I wanted to know, was that part of the reason maybe as to why it was chosen? And it's not. Folklore was chosen simply because he's, in the Lesser Keys of Solomon, I think he's mentioned, and he has like power over the seas and things like that. So he's a very good patron, basically, for Zakur, who is trying to take over the place. So all in all, super sick lore, man. This was a real winner for me. Really got my giblets gibleting, I have to say, with this one. And it was very cool to see Ireland be expanded upon and to learn more about it, because it's very, not just the fact that I'm Irish, but there'll be stuff coming. You'll realize why this is very relevant to my interests. So I really hope that you enjoyed this video and this lore, the stunning art of the member of the Fianna by Mr. Paul Bonner. Can't get enough of it. So thank you all very much for watching, folks. Hope you're having a great day, and all the best.